Live. We are live. ZLS 028. And I am super psyched today because we have the one, the only Mike Hardington, Jeff Cross. This is the real deal.
I don't know who's who at this point. I'm too afraid to ask.
It's a crisis of identity.
I mean, really.
So I was hoping I could get Jeff on the show so we could like switch him out in and out real quick before we got you on, but I think Jeff was busy. So that's cool.
Something about having a farm and like 4 or 5 different pigs.
Yeah. And chickens. I think that's all he's got right now. He's got like kids too.
And a family. Something. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just like he spends all of his time working with pigs and his farm animals. He also has like children that he raises. Because he's a good father.
Yeah, he is a good father. Well, yeah, when I had him on, his kids were all fighting over a Nintendo Switch. They had just gotten Super Mario Builder, whatever that game's called. But I resonated with that. I keep my door locked so the kids don't get in here. I've got 5 of my own here, Mike. So it's yeah. One's out of the house already too. So it's a whole thing. We can talk about that later though. Today I want to find out about you though. So who is Mike Hardington other than like let's get you out of Jeff Cross's shadow. Let's find out who the real Mike Hardington is.
Your mediocre average white guy. I'm a developer. I do things for Ionic.
So what's your role for Ionic right now? Are you DevRel? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm DevRel. I'm basically when we were having conferences, I was the person at the conference. More
back
or less,
in the old days.
Back in the before times. Other than that, I'm just I help our community people out. I manage a lot of blogs and outreach we have with different venues and do whatever I can to help people be successful.
Awesome, man. Well, that sounds like a pretty cool job to have. So we were talking a little bit before we went live about some of your history. This turns out we found another person who worked in Flash in the past. Yesterday we had Philip, and he had a whole backstory, and I give him a hard time because to me Flash is just Homestar Runner. But it's kind of cool to hear you just talk about it. Like at one time, that Flash was the cool stuff, and that's kind of interesting to find out. So,
well, I mean, it was going from we could use Flash because I came from art, so I was used to doing like hand drawn Flash animation. So you're Homestar Runner.
Yeah.
Then I figured out that, hey, you can actually program things with Flash and ActionScript. And there was ActionScript 2, which was like a very, very kind of basic scripting language. And then there was ActionScript 3, which basically was ES4. And that would have been JavaScript had ES4 in JavaScript land not become a total dumpster fire. And then everyone was like, we're not shipping this at all. Let's just go from 3 to 5.
What was it that happened with ES4? Was it stuff with like classes, or was that something else?
It was just a lot of different opinions, a lot of different voices, and people all trying to just throw everything in the kitchen sink at a language.
Yeah.
And it was just becoming a nightmare to actually figure out what the language was going to be. I think Crockford has like a series of videos on the eventual lead up to ES6, and he covers the ES4 in there. And every single time I look at it, I'm just like, huh. So that's why these whole decorator things kind of make sense. All right.
Nice. So before you got into coding though, you're telling me you were in design. So that and that you never thought you'd be in code. So how'd you make that jump?
So I went, I did art and design kind of in college, all throughout. And it was like a very traditional art kind of program. So we were doing like figure drawing, sculpture, painting, a lot of conceptual and like theory behind certain aspects, art history, design history, that whole kind of spiel.
Yeah.
And my concentration was graphic design. So I was originally like my whole hope was to do things like I was going to do album art. I was going to do video game design. And that's really kind of like what I love to do is just like I want to draw some cool album art and or just like even book covers, just like set a mood more or less. And you know, I graduated. We had like one course in that program that was like HTML or what they call web design, which is basically take all your Photoshop mockups and we'll bring them into Dreamweaver.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. I remember when I was in college. So I'm a couple years older than you, I think, but I remember doing an HTML class, and it was like kind of learned some basics about semantics. I remember, and this was before I was in code at all. But I remember them talking about like the big granddaddy of them all was Dreamweaver, and I just took a look at that because I've been messing around with Adobe stuff. I'm like, who would use this? I don't know. I don't want to throw too much shade on Dreamweaver, but
for what it was and for the target people that they were going for, I could build like table-based layouts, and I didn't even need to know what a call span was or how any of the table markup really just worked. All I need to know was I need a table here, and I need to make it this many pixels across, or this many columns across, and this many rows down. And I could bring the whole InDesign design into Dreamweaver, and I was happy.
Okay.
And so it was basically all right. Convert this very traditionally designed brochure and make a site website out of it, which wasn't really as great as you would think it'd be. Contrary to what you think, throwing Photoshop and like traditional design practices into the web doesn't always make a great website.
Yeah. Well, so my dad is my dad's actually a philosophy professor. He teaches at Yale actually, and he has a whole thing on WYSIWYG actually, which is like he's done papers on this, and his argument has always been WYSIWYG is the way to go all times. And I've always thought, well, yeah, if you're in our space, like where you don't know what the piece of paper looks like, it don't work anymore.
Well, but that's one of the things that we always had to like struggle with was I was just like, all right, I'm working on a piece of 11 by 17 paper. And I know my constraints. I know how many pixels or inches. I know what my real estate is and where my paddings and boundaries are going to be. The web at that point, and this was never explained to us, was just like, what are the sizes of the web?
Yeah. Well, what happens with every size?
Is it 800 by 600 pixels like the old CRT displays, or is it a little bit more?
Homestar Runner. It all comes back to Homestar Runner. It wouldn't get any bigger. It would just stay there. And is locked into a certain size. And if you didn't have a screen big enough, it was like tough luck. You're gonna miss some corners. But
you worked with what you got. And
yeah, it's such a crazy problem to think about. Like how just having like variable sizes just throws so much out the window when it comes to certain design stuff. So it's like a whole different paradigm. As soon as you drop in that extra dimension your media, maybe that's not the right word. Your destination size might be changing. So
well, I mean, it was definitely weird and something like a new kind of way to approach things, because after that kind of segment of our course,
Yeah.
Like I knew
Was it all Dreamweaver, or was there? Okay.
It was basically like Dreamweaver, like is our segment for the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
We didn't really talk on design or like web design or web development, and our instructor was a traditional design person, coming out of like the 80s and early 90s kind of design paradigms in New York City. So for him, the web design was like, listen, I knew enough to get me through when I was doing stuff in the early 90s and maybe early 2000s.
Yeah.
I'm not a web designer, but if you want to go into web design and you want to become a web person, you can go to these resources. So he was helpful in that regards, but it was not someone that I would say inspired me to do more web stuff.
Yeah. Well, did you find your way? I'm assuming you must have, when you were doing the Flash stuff. You were finding your way into web stuff eventually. Is that just where the jobs were, or did you ever do like the album covers or the video games?
I actually I did a couple jobs here and there. I went my couple stints at like a print shop where I was like the in-house designer. And then I worked for like this one company that was like an actual manufacturing job, and the
sorry,
in-house.
I'm just noticing we got all these comments. I'm sorry, chat. Sometimes I miss them. Sorry to interrupt you, Mike.
Oh, no worries.
But we got Action Script. We got Brandon in chat. Hey, Brandon. Hey, Crutchcorn.
What's going on, Brandon?
I love you both. Brandon says Dreamweaver for the win.
Dreamweaver was the cool stuff way back when.
Yeah, and Crutchcorn. Crutchcorn does another Twitch chat here, or a Twitch stream. So design to dev path. I think I find a lot of people in web development, especially, that start with design too. So
common kind of ideas and methodologies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I ended up at a marketing job inside of like a manufacturing company. I was doing their in-house kind of pamphlets. It was me and like another designer on this team, and our company was just like, hey, we're going to these trade shows and we're bringing cases upon cases of printed pamphlets, which weigh a ton. And they were like, well, can we get like a couple lightweight iPads or like netbooks to kind of date myself? The terminology at the time were netbooks, little mini laptops.
That's just okay. Just making sure.
Basically, they had Wi-Fi and like maybe 128 gigs of hard drive space.
Yeah.
So we would get those laptops, and he was like, all right, well, can you like install something here, or can we make something that's like they just open up the browser and that's it? I was like, oh, I know some Flash. And my boss was like, you're on it. So for like 3 weeks, he's like, all right, put together this interactive product demo and show us what it looks like. I was like, we can give it a go. Definitely, it worked out, and I got something shipped. So that was how I kind of started doing more dev related stuff or dev work.
Okay. Necessity is a.
I never really wanted to, but when your job's on the line, you do what you need to do.
Your job's on the line.
Done.
That's a really think about it, but yeah. I think necessity, and figuring out how to leverage necessity is like something I'm trying to. There's like some life hack stuff there. You can make yourself, even if you don't have to do something, you can make yourself think you have to do something. There's some weird power there.
When everything feels like it's a little bit of a fire under you, you tend to just do whatever you can to get that fire taken care of.
Well, yes, but that's a terrible place to be too. Like that constant level of anxiety where you're like being slow cooked over a fire. I've been in that situation before, and
never want to be slow cooked. It's always got to be, oh no, this is torture, and I have
yes,
I have my oven set to 500 degrees,
yes,
and I put my hand inside of it.
Yes, I think if you can do that, if you can figure out how to make yourself feel like you're in the 500-degree fire, like 2 weeks before you'd actually be in the 500-degree fire, like there's some weird power in that. I had that at one point. I feel like I lost it for a little bit. I'm trying to get it back, but yeah,
it's all a matter of, all right, I need to motivate myself. Otherwise, if I don't do this thing, I will be fired. Sometimes isn't always the best way to look at it, but you get yourself into the zone and you end up building stuff.
Yeah.
So, built that thing, and then my boss didn't have got an iPad which didn't have Flash, and I had to learn JavaScript. And the rest, they say, is history. It's why I'm here today. So my boss, who wanted me to make something for his iPad, or else he would throw some swears around and throw a little hissy fit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice. Well, so it's pretty interesting to think about that, because so Crutchcorn just shared his experience doing his first website. I had like the same exact thing. It was like we had a project that was due at my old job that we needed a web GUI for, and we hadn't even started, and it's due in like 3 months. And I had a child that was being born in 4 months, and they just had like no clue who was going to do this web dev stuff. And at the time I was just doing Java stuff for them, like systems kind of stuff. And but I was always tinkering with Angular on the side, and I had made this like turn-based RPG that I was like showing off to people at lunchtime and like playing with them. And I don't know, I was having a lot of fun with it, and somehow the president found out that I was doing Angular stuff. He was like, "Get on this! You got 2 months." And we did it. We made it happen. It was actually a lot of fun. And then as soon as I did that project, and as soon as that one kind of got put out the door, a whole bunch of stuff started clicking. It was like, yes, this is what I want to do. That instant feedback, like between the developer experience, like having those instant serves, but also like there's always been something about coding and empathy for me. Like on server side code, you still kind of get that, like when you're leaving an API for someone else to consume or leaving code for someone else to read. But when you're actually like there with the end user, and you're like, this is exactly what they're going to see, and I can make this a little bit better if I like do this or something like that. That was like intoxicating in a weird way. So
I get it. I have tried to do some server side and like back end work and setting up my own API, and for me, it's the abstract quality of back end development. Like there are similar concepts with your models, routes, and figuring out how everything is connected, and you can kind of see the connection between what you do on the front end and what you do on the back end. But the back end, like, how do you test it? How do you like other than just like writing dozens and dozens of tests to actually test a feature?
Yeah.
Going to a browser and being able to open up, the app that you're working on, and just like, there it is. Well, that makes sense. I guess I'm off by 50 pixels. So I just have to adjust it right then and there. Versus, why is that response not turning what I think it is? Where are the headers? Do we have core set up correctly?
Well, like at the end of the day, like if you don't have headers but the app still works, it's like, okay, that's still good. Like the user's not gonna know.
No, but you'll know, and that's even worse.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I have similar thoughts about like end-to-end testing too. I think end-to-end testing puts you in the mindset of an end user, where you're like thinking about how they experience the app. I think unit tests don't do that very well. They actually they distance you from that mindset, I think, a little bit. But it is what it is.
My testing philosophy is pretty weak. It's you should
let's hear it.
You should test.
These are tests.
Other than that, I don't really have a strong opinion on should a unit test, should an end-to-end test? Yes.
Yes. Test
you
all
should
the
do
things.
something.
Yeah. Good deal. Good deal. So how do you find yourself ending up at Ionic? Do you jump right from that job with the manufacturing company into that?
No. So after I made the switch to having to learn JavaScript, I built a few different apps for them, and I rewrote most of the stuff that I had done in Flash and JavaScript, and I had bounced around to different frameworks, different libraries, and they came to me like, "Hey, can we take all this stuff and just like make an app out of it?" And at the time, there's Phonegap, and I was like, "Sure, this Phonegap thing seems pretty interesting."
I am not familiar at all with Phonegap. What is Phonegap?
So Phonegap's like the OG in this kind of hybrid app development, or this I have a web app and I need to deploy it to my native devices.
Okay, cool.
The idea is just you take essentially your web app, you put it inside this native shell or this browser, which has no like UI, like back button, forward back URL bar or what have you. And then you just deploy that to the store, and that's what people download and run. So you basically recreate the entire app UI, but you still have access to, like, say, geolocation, your device features. At the time, the big one was like file system and device motion, because there weren't any browser APIs for that.
Okay, cool.
So I was working with that stuff. I was writing my own things. I found Ionic kind of at the very, very, very beginning. 2013, which is really weird to think that Ionic started like 7 years ago.
That's crazy.
Found their stuff, started writing with it. Around that time, they had also made the move to do Angular JS. And I was like, I don't know what Angular JS is. I don't really have like a library or a framework that I'm using currently. I just have like some backbone.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm learning Angular JS now, and taught myself Angular JS through learning Ionic. And as time kind of goes on, apparently I made a name for myself, and they knew who I was. And I saw that they were hiring, and I reached out. I was like, "Hey, are you hiring somebody?" And they're like, "Sure, send us your resume," which was like a really hastily put together Google Doc.
Nice.
Had like a 20-minute call with the co-founders. And a week later, they're like, "Yeah, would you like to join as a contractor?" Yeah. After the contracting period, our co-founder Ben, who is just the nicest person, had called me up, and he's like, "Hey, you have a minute to like chat or something?" And I was like, "Oh no, my contract's ending, and they're not going to renew." And they're like, "We want to bring you on full time." And I was like, yes, please. Cool.
That's
so
awesome.
Your first week will be this one. You're also flying out to Madison that very first week. We're doing like a very early company retreat. So your first week is a company retreat. Welcome. Nice. So that was 6 years ago, and
wow.
With a warm welcome like that, why would you want to go anywhere else?
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So So Ionic, I'm trying to think for like our listeners, because I did a little bit of research on Ionic, trying in preparation for you being on here. Let me see if I can kind of summarize the Ionic philosophy or approach, and you can tell me where I'm wrong. Does that sound good? Okay, so the Ionic approach is kind of to build components, web components that will, it's kind of like you were talking about with Phonegap, that's still inside of a web wrapper, but it is, the web components you will use will make it appear as if you're on a native app. So like the toggles, for example, will look like iOS if you're on iOS. It'll look like Android if you're on Android. And Ionic also is writing capacitor, I believe, or maintains capacitor, or I don't know, owns it, something like that. And that'll give like, it's like a wrapper around whatever native APIs exist for the platform of choice, so that you could access any kind of native stuff as well. So that way, if you look at like native script or like what's the other one? React Native, you kind of still have to write two apps a little bit, depending on which platform you're on. Whereas Ionic feels like it's much closer to write once, where you could potentially just write one app that's your native app, and it'll be a thing. Is that close? Did I come close?
So you came like 90% there. So
give me the other 10%. You got this.
Sure. Well, let's go into the weeds and like kind of figure out the details.
Okay.
So Ionic Framework is just a collection of components that give you that native like experience. So like you said, if you're on Android, there's a whole different paradigm on how menus should work, how like a tabbed-based interface should work. On iOS, they have a similar UI design, but the behavior between each of them is slightly different. But a little bit different. But like, it's that final detail that really stands out and makes iOS feel like iOS. Mm-hmm. So our focus with Ionic Framework is just make sure that component experience is as close as native as we can get. So this includes making sure that the routing feels good on native, being able to like push a new page and then swipe to go back, which is something, it's really difficult to do and to do it right. But we're full of talented devs, and we've been able to do it well in the web.
Awesome. So does Ionic, is Ionic for iOS and Android, or is there also like a desktop version?
So we break it down as there is the iOS design and then the material design. Okay. And we kind of default to material design on the desktop just because it's like an okay middle ground for everything.
Yeah, and for our listeners, the material design is kind of akin to the Android stuff. So that's the Google design philosophy, right?
Yeah, it's all Google's design. If you've used Angular Material before, it's that same kind of design language. Right. So we use that for desktop and for Android devices. And basically, if we can't really figure out what the platform is, we'll just default to that.
Yeah.
JVA coming in here with this question.
If you're Mac OS or Win, you get material and you like it.
Actually, with Mac OS, you get the iOS design.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, which is coming out pretty good, because with the new updates in Big Sur, Mac OS apps already feel like a little bit closer to the iOS equivalent. So it's like we have less and less work to do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And Ionic components will actually work really well in the web still too, right?
Yeah, and that's like the big thing is that it's web first, and then everything else just kind of like progressively enhanced on top of it. So if we can work in like the least extreme platform, and then we can work with the most device feature platform as well.
Awesome. Well, Mike, going back to my story a little bit, where I had like the crazy project to get out this web app before my baby was born. As soon as I finished that project, I immediately went to, how do I take all this work and make it so I never have to do it again, but I can make myself faster going forward. And so I started looking at stuff as soon as I got back from my paternity leave, and was like trying to figure out how can we capture this. So we just like have these packages, we pull them off the shelf, and where I landed was NX, which was just kind of coming out at the time. And so I became obsessed with NX. Eventually found myself at Narwhal. But the part of,
funny how that works out.
I know, isn't that neat? It was, I don't know. That was kind of a shock. I think I remember Narwhal just tweeted that they were looking to fill some positions, and I was like, well, I love their stuff. Let me throw a resume and see what happens. And yeah, I didn't think I'd even get a response back, but somehow I got the job. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, going back to like that it was like, I don't know, it was like this mood came over me. There was this magnetism about everything that was happening with NX, with the mono repos, with reusing that stuff. And I was like, this is so close. Like everything here, we've got things structured really, really well. So we just have these presentational components. Our logic is separate. It's all there. Like we are so close to just having a native desktop app, a mobile app for everything we do. And I never actually got to like really pursue that itch, but I was definitely poking around at Ionic for a long time, like trying to see how easy would this be to just like take that app and somehow figure out how to fork them off into libraries and then just have my presentational components. Like it was like the Indiana Jones thing, trying to switch out my web components for like Ionic ones. I guess I could have just been using Ionic ones from the start, but
I mean,
yeah.
We've gone through different iterations where we have said just use all Ionic all the time, and we realize that sometimes it's a hard sell when people have existing infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
If you have an existing app, you're not necessarily going to want to go back and rewrite your entire app. So with a couple of iterations we've done in our 4.0, which was like 2 years ago. Not 2 years ago. Yeah, it was like 2 years ago. It feels like. That was the big moment where we said, okay, what if we just made it feel more like a proper library for Angular, where you can add the components as you see fit, kind of just use them in bits and pieces, mix it with other existing Angular libraries, and not have to jump through so many hoops. So maybe in a couple of years ago it wasn't doable, but it's definitely doable now.
Okay, cool. I haven't revisited the library recently, but that's I did have this project. As soon as Narwhal hired me, I was like trying to like get super familiar with everything it could do, and I had like this idea for like a card game that would be same card game on web and on mobile. And I don't know if that would be a good fit for Ionic or not, actually, now that I think about it, but why not? Why not? Give it a shot. There we go. So yeah, man. So what if you're, so I'm trying to figure out how to phrase the question. Maybe let me just ask you this. Do you, that magnetism I describe about like wanting to code reuse all the things, was that kind of what drove you to Ionic a little bit too? or was it more just trying to get mobile into JS?
I think a lot of it had to do with the mobile in JS versus trying to reuse everything.
Okay.
When I first started,
sorry, Nicole. Sometimes I just have brain farts. Forgive me, Mike.
It happens to the best of us. I have brain farts literally. I've had brain farts for 30 years. My entire life is a brain fart.
Your entire life.
When I was like building out those apps, I really just want to focus on, can I make the web and native just kind of feel like there is no difference? And I was always drawn to like that part. It's like, why can't the web be a really, really good platform? And like historically, back in those days, I was using Phonegap. And their original goal was like, the web is first-class citizen and should be treated as such. And the web should be a good platform that anyone can use. And so that was like, I like that. I like those ideas. And that's just kind of drove me to keep on going.
Yeah. Well, so sort of the push for web too. So I remember back when I had like my first iPhone, like Facebook was just when you went to Facebook, I think the only option you had initially, you didn't have the app. I don't think there was even the App Store yet with like iPhone 1. It was a browser and you opened up Facebook, right? And that was kind of like I remember thinking, I wonder if this is the future. Like if just all websites now have just like a mobile version. And it's weird that we kind of went the other way. What's that?
Originally, so this is always a fun thing that I like to point out, is that when the iPhone was first released, Steve Jobs' idea was, we're not going to have a dedicated SDK. We're not going to be building native apps. We're going to build
he was
apps.
super against the App Store, right?
Yeah,
initially.
He thought it was a dumb idea and that it would not be successful. And that he wanted to push open standards in the web forward. And Apple's all like, yay, the web. And the developers were all like, boo the web. We're not going to do this. Give us an SDK. More or less. Like, he took these people who were, granted, it was 2007 and 2008. Again, these were the before times of jQuery.
Before times.
jQuery and Backbone were like the thing.
Yeah.
So maybe it was a good idea to use some of that. But I had always thought the web's going to be a really good platform. And if I'm going to be successful and want to not have to learn yet another thing, I should just focus on the web.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. What would the world look like right now if Apple held to its guns about like, no, if you want to get some app on here, it's got to go through the web.
They wouldn't be a $2 trillion company. That'd be for sure. Yeah.
Well, would the web be better? Would the web be better off? I almost wonder if it would. I don't know. I don't know.
These are the things that'll keep me up at night. Just sitting there, it's like, what would the world be like?
What would the web be like? Even more important.
We'd have more Balmers just going, developers.
Yeah, Nicole saying started my dev life with Java and JSPs. Yeah, that's where I was too. Had to write a lot of Java and then just slap some JSP on top.
I am always jealous of people who came from like a Java background, because I've never had to do Java before, and I just never want to.
It went going from Java to JavaScript. Well, going from Java to Angular was like, it felt like I was becoming a real developer. Like it was like becoming a real boy, you know, like getting into like all the nice dev experience that came with it, like the builder, the CLI, type checking. Well, I guess type checking you get in JavaScript too, or Java, but it's just different. Like I think I was still running like JetBrains, or not JetBrains. What's that IDE that people use for Java?
Eclipse?
No,
it wasn't Eclipse.
Was it NetBeans?
NetBeans.
Eclipse was the other one. Yeah. I think I was running NetBeans. It was just I don't know. Didn't feel great. Yeah, IntelliJ was pretty good actually. I think that's the Jeff Brains one. But
He's talking about all this template syntax and strong developer experience. I had underscore, jQuery, and Backbone, and I was happy, damn it.
Nice.
I had my models and events, and that's all I needed, and I can construct so many cool things.
Yeah. Well, so JSPs, Nicole, I don't know if you've ever written the schematics, but JSPs and schematics actually have a lot in common when you're writing them. And I don't know, I kind of got like like a little bit of, I don't know, post-trauma stuff going on when I started writing schematics a little bit.
Like, oh, this seems very familiar.
This something's off. What's wrong? What's wrong here? Well, so Mike, would you have preferred the net to be more prominent in mobile right now? I feel like the prospect of going to Facebook right now in my mobile browser, it's like, why would I do that? I think that it's kind of weird if you think about some of the incentives of it. Like, I think a lot of these companies want people in their native app. Like there's the thing that was on Twitter not that long ago about, what was it? Reddit, I think it was. Reddit keep trying to push people to the app when they click a link because most people are getting there from like links on Twitter or Facebook or something. But going to native, they get a lot more control over your machine than like the web's kind of like it's still kind of a dangerous place, but it's designed to be protective, a little bit more protective of the user. So
yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it from the two different perspectives. As a user, I don't want to ever have to download a huge app just to like look at some, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's that real popular review? Yelp. I don't want to have to download all of Yelp just to see, hey, what's this place down the road? What's their menu? I don't have to do that. I'd rather just go to the web and just be able to browse that. But at the same time, as a person who has pulled back the curtains, seen all the horrible, horrible things that can happen on the web, building with native sometimes and having a native app where you have more control gives you that high polished experience. So like keyboards on the web are horrible, and building responsive forms around them just never really feels like it's going to be a good time. You're always going to have some kind of weird thing where your body element is scrolling, but then the keyboard tries to display and pushes the input up even further. So it's this weird kind of like
text areas alone is just like enough to kill it.
Div with content editable is just a nightmare. It'll never make anything really fun. So but at the same time, the simplicity and ubiquity of the web is just like one of those things where I'm like, this is the side I want to be on. I don't want to have to download 200 something megabytes of Facebook or Twitter or Yelp. I'm just going to pick on Yelp this entire time now because it's in my mind, and they keep trying to make me download the app.
Dang it, Yelp!
I don't want to download an app. Just let me look at the menu. That's all I want to do.
Yeah. J Van Allen asks, how does that make you feel about WASM then?
I don't have any. I think it's cool. I think it's got some nice parts to it, and I like the idea. I just don't know if I feel like it cool. So we can take all of this entire C library for image encoding, and we can just throw that at the web. That totally makes sense.
Cool. Yeah.
Welp, guess we decided to make the web an operating system.
Nice. Why not?
Yeah, 90 megabyte native app on the web. Sure, why not? Why don't we
Why
just
not?
take an entire APK from Android and throw it on the web? Now that I say that, someone probably has already tried to do that.
Why not? Why not? What is 90 megabytes among friends?
Well, just 90 megabytes, but just one person's data plan for 3 months. Ah.
Dang. Well, yeah, Mike. So I don't know. I want to talk some more about just the idea of code sharing a little bit. I'm recognizing it's my passion and maybe not yours, but so I think you had you had mentioned like some of the interesting parts of NX and mono repos kind of flourishing. I feel like NX is really kind of flourishing right now, right as Ionic's coming out with some interesting stuff. So capacitor is pretty new, right?
It's been like a year-ish, but we've been pretty quiet. Just kind of building it out and trying to grow the user base. Figuring out what are some of the things that people need and what are some stuff that what are some of the things that we need to do to make this project succeed and be right. Like, can we release 2 or 3 open source products and be successful in every single one of them? So it's just been doing the groundwork to make sure that capacitor is something that the community will actually want to use.
Yeah. Well, was my description of capacitor essentially correct?
In a sense, yeah. So I would say there's like 2 parts of the capacitor. There is the native runtime, and then there is the JavaScript API.
Okay.
So the native script, the native runtime is essentially that web view where we're loading up our web app and then just deploying it to the App Store. The JavaScript, and that's pretty, run of the mill. It's nothing I would say that's overly new or like overly like ambitious. It's just doing things that have been done before. The part that I think that really makes it better is the JavaScript API, where other approaches have tried to build on top of the standard web APIs like Navigator, media devices, .get user media, whatever it is, to get the camera. We provide our own kind of API that sits on top of that. Okay. So if you are on a device, say you're on, you want to make a plugin or you want to expose an API to work with Face ID or Touch ID. Okay. That will only exist on iOS. The way capacitor works, you can build out essentially like a proxy for iOS, for Android and for the web, and then build out the implementation for iOS. And then the JavaScript API will know how to say, oh, I'm calling Android. Quietly just reject the promise that there's going to be Touch ID or Face ID there. So there's like this idea that between all these different platforms, we can share one common kind of like abstract implementation, and then the other like platforms will just basically implement it. So we have the abstract kind of, I am the Touch ID object, and then everything else just like will actually do the work.
Yeah. Interesting. So it seems like it all kind of revolves around the write once philosophy, maybe, right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that we want to do, is just be able to target one platform and not have to either do conditionals or have, okay, well, this is my component for iOS and this is my component for Android.
Yeah.
No, here's my component. the library and the runtime should be able to figure out what do I need to make this work.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible that you've got that working. Like, especially like what you said with the way iOS and Android, like the way they do their menu systems and stuff like that. You get that to get that right seems like a very, very difficult, complex problem, and one that is just like you can't not make it complex. I feel like, but yeah, super impressive.
It's a lot of moving parts, and we're just very careful about how we do things.
Yeah. So there was a point in Ionic's history where Ionic was like very closely tied with Angular, right? And then now I've when I was looking at Ionic to research it a bit before today, it looks like it's gone like to mainly stencil based web components. Was that in like reaction to Angular kind of not being quite as popular as you thought it might be? Or
no. So we have been built on Angular for a number of years.
Yeah.
We went from the Angular JS days. We were like one of the first libraries for Angular 2 at the time. It was Angular 2, but for regular Angular. But we had always had this original goal way, way, way back in like 2013 to support other frameworks too.
Yeah.
If we had looked in the repo, there are bindings for Angular JS, Ember, and just plain old jQuery. So the goal to be cross-framework for us had always existed, and I don't think when Angular JS we decided to just stick with that, there was no other alternative that seemed like it was a good idea. Fast forward to when Angular came out, and we were building on it. We had noticed React obviously has its own component paradigm. Vue has its own component paradigm. Other libraries have their own component paradigm. So there was a similar kind of vocabulary between all of these different frameworks that we were like, all right, what can we do to create our components that would be able to target all these different frameworks, but we're just writing it in a higher level abstraction. And that's ended up what became Stencil. It's just our way to author web components that can work in Angular, React, and Vue.
Nice. So I'm not super familiar with Stencil. I've heard of it, and it seems like a really cool project. Is the idea that it's just spitting out like there's the I forget what it's called, the Create Component API. That's just like so I think that even predates like Angular. It's just a web API where you can define I think it's a custom component API.
Yeah, custom elements.
Custom elements. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
is that what's your Stencil is spitting out? Is it custom elements, or is it like a component? Is it one code base that can compile to React or to Angular or to Vue, or how does that work?
So when you are writing like a Stencil component, it compiles down to your standard custom element.
Okay.
And that's like this self-contained, just all you need to know, all this button or all this toggle needs to know is self-contained to that.
Yeah.
Then from there, we extract all that type information. So its value, what could the value be? Value could be anything. What is its state? Well, its state is either true or false. We have all this type information, and from that, we're able to create pseudo Angular components that provide the correct type information for what its inputs are and what its outputs are.
Right. Interesting.
Then from the React side, we're able to say, all right, well, here are all the different, we'll take these, what we call properties or inputs for Angular. We'll create the properties types for this. For all the outputs, we'll create the stub kind of events or on event props that we can pass to it. and we're able to just essentially create all of these components from one web component that has all the type information provided to it.
Mm.
So this is really great for, like, if you want to talk about ultimate code reuse and code sharing, being able to have like a mono repo that has several Angular apps and a React app, and then this one collection of web components. You're essentially creating your entire design system with Scaffold, and then being able to target that for any of your design properties or any of your other web properties.
Yeah. Well, so like the custom elements almost seemed like the original skeleton key that was supposed to make all that stuff possible. I don't know. It doesn't feel like that now. I don't know why, but
there's some discussions around that. I mean, a lot of people. Angular was built from the ground up to support this stuff.
Right. So that's what makes like Angular elements so easy, because you're pretty much implementing the spec already. It's just we're keeping it in Angular, but we could export it. We could export each one of our components as its own custom element, right?
Yeah.
And then just let. Well, we could just let like regular vanilla JavaScript like do stuff with it, but you still have to ship Angular with that element when it comes in, right?
For like change detection and the compiler and renderer. React kind of does make things difficult here.
So React purposely doesn't. Well, not purposely doesn't, but it doesn't do the custom element. It doesn't try to uphold the standard, right?
No, and a lot of that has to do with the way React works, and that everything kind of separates itself from the DOM.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get web components into React, you can do it. It's just going to be some work. Because you basically have to work against React to make it understand how this web component should work and what are some of the props and events that it can do.
Is getting a React component into a custom element, is that doable?
Not unless you want to load all of React.
Okay.
So it's getting a web component into all the frameworks is rather easy. Okay. Getting the frameworks to be able to
into a web
component, that's the difficult part. So like, and I kind of hate to say it, like I like the idea of Angular elements, but unless they could figure out a way to get rid of all the Angular aspects of it and just say, here is like the very minimal aspects that you need for a component, figure out how to do the bindings and everything else, it's never going to be something I would highly recommend.
Okay.
Sorry, Rob. Sorry, Rob Wormhole out there.
you know he's watching.
Nothing but love for you.
Nothing but love, Rob. But yeah, Svelte's super interesting to me in that respect because
Svelte does an amazing job at that.
Yeah, I want to get my hands a little bit more dirty with Svelte, but my understanding is that when you're building at build time, you're essentially taking anything that makes it Svelte and taking that out. So you're, I don't know if they're using custom elements or not. I imagine they must be.
You can. You can output a custom element from Svelte because of the same reason, though, why, what makes it so compelling is that it has a compiler that understands all the internals and can figure out what can I remove, what can I not remove, and what does this component need. So it has that whole idea of localization for that component that makes the footprint of that component like so insignificant. It's really, really small. Sorry.
Yeah.
Small is actually really, really fast.
Yeah. Well, there's no, I don't know. It seems like there's no Svelte that comes out at the end of the day, and that's probably what makes it so fast, right? Like just that it doesn't have to.
It's what makes the component so Svelte.
So Svelte. I see what you did there. Very nice, Mike. Very, very, very nice. Well, we're coming up to the end of our time, Mike. Do you have a last piece of good advice to give people? Maybe something you're passionate about you want to share?
Have hobbies outside of tech. It really helps avoid any burnout. Sometimes some of the best ideas and best decisions made happen when you're not doing what it is you're supposed to be doing for work.
Yeah.
Now that we're all working from home, take 20 minutes to go for a walk.
I've been doing a lot of that.
if anything drastic happens in 20 minutes, you probably weren't even a deciding factor in it, or it was going to happen whether or not you were there.
There you go. Well, do you mind if I ask what your hobbies are?
I do a lot of woodworking.
Oh, nice.
I have a little shop down in my basement, so I build a lot of furniture. Bunch of music and guitars.
Nice.
Play a little bit. Never go off camera to get your guitars. I got like music. I got some woodworking, just like little tinkering and fun stuff to do.
Yeah.
And Josh, that is a compliment. Slowly turning into Nick Offerman. I wish.
Awesome. Did you see? Sorry to bring up Jeff again. Nick Offerman responded to one of Jeff's tweets about.
I saw that, and then I had to like DM Jeff. I was like, Jeff, did you see this already? He tweeted at you and responded back. He goes, oh my God, I didn't even see that. It's so awesome.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. All right, Mike, thank you so much for coming on. It was awesome to have you. Awesome to meet you. This is our first time actually having a conversation. So it's nice to actually see the real Mike and not just the memes about beards that we keep sending each other. So
there's more than a beard to me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for what you do for the community, the larger community, for what you do with Ionic. Open source projects, I think, are awesome. And I appreciate you guys doing all you do and putting it out into the world. I love it.
Thanks for having me on. It's fun.
Sweet. Yeah. Tomorrow we'll be on our earlier time slot, so we'll be at 3:30 Eastern time, and we'll have Lars, and we're going to be looking at Dino. So we're just going to see how far we can get in an hour. So hopefully you'll join us then, and I'll see y'all tomorrow for next episode of ZLS. Bye now.